Single mom was about to give birth. The doctor was her billionaire ex. He did something unbelievable. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain hammered against the taxi windshield as Emily Carter clutched her belly, pain tearing through her like lightning. "Please, sir, the hospital is only a few blocks away," she gasped, her voice trembling. The driver looked at her through the rearview mirror, uneasy. "Ma'am, I already told you, I need the fare up front." Emily fumbled through her worn purse, her hands shaking, finding only a few crumpled dollar bills and coins. "This is all I have," she whispered. The driver sighed, then shook his head and pulled over. "I am sorry, lady. I have got my own kids to feed." The door clicked open, and cold rain slashed her face as she stepped out. The city lights blurred behind her tears. Every contraction felt sharper, closer together. She pressed her hand against the wall of a closed bakery, breathing through the pain. Somewhere a siren wailed, the sound blending with her shallow breaths. She was alone, drenched, terrified, and due any minute. 2 years ago, she had been married to a man whose hands could save lives, a man who once promised to love her forever. But forever had ended when money, rumors, and pride poisoned what they had. Now, she was just another single mother fighting for a chance to bring her baby safely into the world. A passing stranger finally noticed her and called an ambulance. Minutes later, she was rushed into the emergency room of St. Andrew's Hospital. Nurses surrounded her, checking her vitals, asking questions she could barely answer between waves of pain. "We need an attending now," someone shouted. The door opened, and a tall man in a white coat stepped in, shaking rain from his hair. His presence commanded the room instantly. "What do we have?" he asked, his voice steady, practiced. The nurse began briefing him, but as his gaze moved to the patient on the bed, he froze. The world seemed to stop. The woman lying before him, pale and trembling, was Emily, his ex-wife. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. His breath caught as memories flooded back, the laughter in their first apartment, the night they lost everything to a lie he believed. "No," she whispered when she finally recognized him. "Please, not you." She tried to sit up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Get another doctor." But her words were cut short by another contraction that stole her breath. He stepped closer, voice low but firm. "Emily, listen to me. You are not going to die here. Neither is our child." Her tears mixed with the sweat on her face as her fingers gripped the edge of the bed. "Our child?" she echoed, the pain and disbelief twisting in her voice. "You lost that right when you walked away." The monitors beeped faster. A nurse called out a warning about the baby's heart rate dropping. The doctor, Daniel Reed, one of the most respected surgeons in the city, looked at the screen and then back at her. All the walls he had built over 2 years crumbled in an instant. "Prep the operating room," he ordered. "Now." As they wheeled her toward the doors, Emily's vision blurred. Her last thought before the anesthesia took her under was that fate had a cruel sense of humor. She had spent 2 years avoiding him, and now her life and her babies were in his hands. Rain still whispered against the hospital windows as the fluorescent lights glowed, pale and steady. Daniel Reed stood at the end of the corridor, staring through the glass at the surgical team preparing Emily for the emergency procedure. The rhythmic beeping of machines filled the air, mixing with muffled orders from nurses. His hands, steady by training, trembled slightly as he scrubbed in. 2 years of distance could not erase the image of her face, nor the sound of her voice the day she had walked out of his life. Back then, he had believed every poisonous word whispered by others that she had betrayed him, that her love had been for his wealth, not his heart. He had signed the divorce papers with cold precision, convincing himself he was protecting his pride. But now, seeing her fragile and pale on the operating table, that pride felt meaningless. The anesthesiologist gave a brief nod. "Vitals stable, doctor." Daniel exhaled slowly, focusing on the monitors. "Let us begin." Every movement was deliberate, measured, but his heart pounded like thunder. The nurses worked silently beside him, unaware that the woman on the table had once shared his last name. "Blood pressure dropping," a nurse called. Daniel reacted instantly, adjusting the line and issuing firm instructions. The baby's heartbeat fluttered weakly over the speaker. "Come on, little one," he muttered, voice cracking despite himself. The delivery felt like a battle against time. When the cry finally came, a thin, desperate wail slicing through the silence, the entire room seemed to breathe again. A nurse lifted the newborn, wrapped in a white blanket, and turned to Daniel. "It is a girl." His breath caught. For a fleeting moment, he saw Emily's eyes reflected in that tiny face. "Let her see her mother," he said quietly, stepping back. His chest felt heavy, his heart a knot of regret and awe. As the nurse carried the baby to the recovery room, Daniel removed his gloves and looked at Emily, who was still unconscious but breathing steadily. "You did it," he whispered. "You both did." Later, in the hallway, Daniel stood alone at the vending machine, a paper cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. The adrenaline had faded, leaving exhaustion and guilt. He could still hear her words from earlier. "You lost that right when you walked away." She was right. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. Back then, his company had been on the verge of collapse, his reputation under attack. A rival investor had shown him fabricated photos implying Emily had taken money from their joint account to help another man. He had not even asked her to explain. He had just walked out. And now fate had placed her back in his life in the most fragile moment imaginable. The door to the recovery room opened, and Nurse Harper approached. "Dr. Reed," she said softly. "Mother and baby are stable. She will wake up soon." Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you." He hesitated before asking, "Does she know I was the one who—" The nurse shook her head. She was under anesthesia the entire time. He stared at the tiled floor, torn between relief and disappointment. "Keep her comfortable," he murmured, "and make sure she has everything she needs. No billing, no paperwork under her name." Nurse Harper tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Yes, doctor." When she left, Daniel turned back toward the room. Through the glass, he could see Emily lying still, her dark hair damp against the pillow, her hand resting beside the sleeping infant. The sight struck him like a blade, gentle, painful, inevitable. He pressed a palm to the glass, whispering to the quiet room beyond. "I do not deserve to stand here, but I will not walk away this time." The hallway was empty except for the hum of machines and the distant call of a hospital intercom. Outside, dawn began to break, painting the wet city in shades of silver and blue. Daniel stayed there for a long time, watching mother and child breathe in sync, unaware that his world had just started turning again. When Emily woke, the room was dim, except for a thin stripe of sunlight slipping through the blinds. The faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air, and the rhythmic beep of the monitor beside her matched the slow rise and fall of her chest. For a few seconds, she did not remember where she was. Then the ache in her body reminded her. The baby. Her heart raced as she turned her head, pain rippling through her side. On the clear crib next to her bed lay a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby's face was peaceful, her tiny fingers curled into perfect fists. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She reached out with trembling hands, brushing the soft fabric, the weight of relief washing over her. She whispered, "We made it, little one." A nurse entered quietly, carrying a clipboard. "Good morning, Miss Carter. How are you feeling?" Emily's throat tightened. "Is she all right?" The nurse smiled. "She is healthy and strong. You did great. Rest is important now." Emily nodded weakly, her gaze returned to her daughter. Who delivered her?" The nurse hesitated for half a second, eyes flickering toward the door before answering. "Dr. Reed handled the surgery. He insisted on staying the entire night to make sure you both were stable." Emily froze. The name hit her like a jolt of cold air. "Dr. Reed?" "Daniel." Her mind spun as she processed the words. Her ex-husband, the man she had spent 2 years trying to forget, was the one who had brought their daughter into the world. The nurse adjusted the blanket around Emily's shoulders. "You are lucky he was on call. He is one of the best." "Lucky," the word echoed bitterly in her head. She waited until the nurse left before whispering, "Why now, Daniel? Why you?" Across the hall, Daniel sat in the staff lounge, still wearing his scrub top, a cup of coffee gone cold beside him. He had reviewed her charts a dozen times, pretending to study numbers and statistics, but what he really wanted was to walk back into that room. He had been in countless operating rooms, performed hundreds of procedures, but never had he felt his chest tighten the way it did when Emily's heart monitor had faltered mid-surgery. He had almost lost her, and the thought of that still shook him, His assistant entered the room, holding a tablet. "Dr. Reed, the board meeting is starting in 30 minutes. He nodded absently. "Reschedule it." "Sir, they are expecting—" "Reschedule it," he repeated, his tone final. When the assistant left, he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. 2 years ago, he had buried himself in work, convinced it would silence the guilt. But guilt had a way of breathing, of waiting. Now it had found him again, crying softly from a hospital crib. Hours later, when he finally gathered the courage to check on Emily, he stopped outside her door, watching through the glass. She was awake, holding the baby, humming softly. Her hair was messy, her face pale, but she looked more beautiful than he remembered. He took a slow breath and stepped inside. Emily looked up, startled. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and fragile. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Alive," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Thanks to you, apparently." He nodded, unsure how to respond. "You and the baby are both safe. That is all that matters." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why were you even here, Daniel? I thought you only worked at your private hospital." He swallowed. "I do, but I volunteer here once a month. Tonight was my rotation." She let out a hollow laugh. "So fate decided you should save me. How poetic." He stepped closer, his tone softening. "I am sorry, Emily, for everything." She looked down at the baby in her arms. "You have had 2 years to say that." Her words were not cruel, just tired. Daniel felt the weight of every moment he had wasted pressing against his ribs. "I know," he said simply, "but I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn the right to say it again." Emily did not reply. The monitor beside her beeped steadily, filling the silence between them. She turned her attention back to the tiny face in her arms. "Her name is Grace," she said finally. Daniel's voice caught as he repeated it under his breath. "Grace." The name felt like both a gift and a sentence. He wanted to hold his daughter, to tell her the truth, but he knew he had no right, not yet. Instead, he stood quietly, memorizing the sound of her breathing, as if it might teach him how to begin again. The next morning, the hospital corridors were alive with the muted rhythm of another day. Wheels rolled softly against polished floors, and the scent of disinfectant hung in the air. Emily sat up slowly in her bed, cradling baby Grace against her chest. The child's small hand grasped her finger with surprising strength, a silent promise of life. A knock at the door interrupted the quiet. A young nurse peeked in with a clipboard. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Dr. Reed will be by to check on you shortly." Emily's stomach tightened. She had hoped he would be too busy to come. She was not ready to see him again, not when every memory still hurt like a reopened wound. She nodded stiffly. "Thank you." After the nurse left, she whispered to the sleeping infant, "We will be fine, Grace. We always have been." A few minutes later, the door opened again. Daniel stepped inside, his expression composed but weary. He wore a clean white coat, the name Dr. Daniel Reed embroidered neatly on the pocket. In his hand was a clipboard, though his eyes were focused only on Emily and the baby. "How are you feeling today?" he asked softly. "Tired," she said, her tone neutral. "But we are stable, right?" The nurse said everything looks good. "Everything looks perfect," he replied, his voice quieter than the machines beside her. "Your daughter is healthy. You both are recovering well." She nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Then there is nothing else to discuss." Daniel hesitated, then took a step closer. "Emily, please. I need to explain what happened back then." Her eyes met his, sharp and filled with restrained pain. "Explain? After 2 years, you signed the papers without letting me speak. You let everyone believe I was after your money. What could you possibly say now that would matter?" He exhaled slowly. "I was wrong. I let people manipulate me. I let my pride destroy what we had." Emily gave a bitter laugh that cracked halfway. "And now what? You think saving me erases all of that?" He looked down, the confession catching in his throat. "No, but it is a start." The tension between them was heavy, but underneath it was something unspoken, a quiet grief, a trace of the love that had once held them together. Before she could respond, the door opened again, and a tall woman in a navy blazer stepped in. Her tone was brisk. "Dr. Reed, the board is waiting. They have been calling since morning." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Tell them I will join later." The woman looked between them, realizing the weight of the moment, then left silently. Emily shook her head. You do not have to stay. I do not need charity. It is not charity, Daniel said firmly. I am staying because I want to, because I should have never left in the first place. Her shoulders trembled, but she kept her voice steady. You do not get to rewrite the past, Daniel. You cannot just walk in here and pretend we are the same people. He nodded slowly. You are right. We are not the same, but maybe we can still do something right for her. He looked at Grace, whose tiny chest rose and fell with calm innocence. Emily's anger softened for a heartbeat before she caught herself. You think you can be part of her life after everything? You did not even know she existed until last night. And that is my fault, he admitted, voice cracking. But I want to try, if you will let me. The silence stretched, filled only by the steady hum of machines. Emily turned away, blinking back tears. Right now, what Grace needs is peace, not promises. Daniel lowered his eyes. Then I will give you both that, for as long as you need. He walked toward the door, pausing one last time to glance at them. The sight of Emily holding Grace etched itself into his mind, the two people he had lost and somehow been given a second chance to protect. As he left the room, Emily whispered into her daughter's soft hair. He says he wants to stay, but hearts do not heal with words. They heal with time. Outside, Daniel leaned against the hallway wall, pressing his hands over his face. The morning light streamed through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. For the first time in years, he felt something fragile stirring inside him, a hope he was almost afraid to name. 3 days passed, and the hospital began to fade from the chaos of that stormy night. Emily's room, once filled with the steady hum of machines and nurses' footsteps, now carried a softer rhythm, the quiet breathing of a newborn and the whisper of a mother's lullaby. Grace slept peacefully against her chest, her small heartbeat a steady reminder that miracles could bloom even in broken places. Daniel visited every day, though he always knocked lightly before entering. He never stayed long, only enough to check on her vitals, to make sure she was eating, to ask gentle questions that always ended with the same sentence. If you need anything, Emily, please let me know. His voice was careful, low, as if he feared that saying too much might shatter the fragile air between them. On the fourth morning, Emily sat by the window, watching the drizzle outside while Grace slept in the bassinet beside her. Daniel entered quietly, holding a file in his hand. You are being discharged tomorrow, he said. The baby's weight is good. You are both healthy enough to go home. She nodded. Thank you, doctor. The formality in her tone cut through him. He cleared his throat. Emily, please, you do not have to call me that. Her eyes stayed on the rain. It feels safer that way. He took a step closer. I know I have no right to ask, but I would like to help you financially, or with the baby. Anything. She turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. Daniel, I have managed alone since the day you left. I can manage still. I know you can, he said quickly, but you should not have to. I was supposed to be there. Her lips trembled, but she steadied herself. Supposed to be, yes, but we both know what happens when people make promises they cannot keep. He wanted to argue, to explain everything, the forged bank records, the lies that poisoned their marriage, but he stopped himself. The truth could wait. Right now, all that mattered was that she and their daughter were safe. A knock on the door interrupted them. It was Nurse Harper again, smiling as she wheeled in a small bouquet of white lilies. These are for you, Miss Carter. They were left at the front desk. No name on the card. Emily frowned, reading the small envelope. Inside was a single note, written in neat handwriting, for Grace, whose name means undeserved kindness. She recognized the handwriting instantly, but said nothing. Daniel's eyes flickered briefly toward the flowers, then away. Harper smiled at the baby. She is beautiful. You must be proud. I am, Emily said softly. After the nurse left, the silence between them grew heavy again. Daniel finally spoke. Do you have somewhere to go after discharge? Yes. My friend Clara offered her spare room until I find a place. Clara Williams? He asked, surprised. From your old firm? Emily nodded. She has been helping me since I left the city. Daniel swallowed, remembering how he had once accused that same friend of influencing Emily to leave him. Another regret added to the long list. Emily, I am not asking for forgiveness, he said quietly, but I do want to make sure you and Grace never struggle again. She sighed. Money was never what I wanted from you, Daniel. I wanted you to believe me. That is all. His chest tightened. I know, and I failed you in that. Grace stirred in her sleep, letting out a soft whimper. Instinctively, both of them moved at once, Emily to soothe her, Daniel to reach for a tissue. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, the air stilled. The old connection flickered between them like a forgotten melody. Emily pulled back quickly, clutching Grace to her. "Please, Daniel, do not make this harder." He nodded, his voice rough. "I will not. I promise." When he left the room, he paused in the hallway, staring through the narrow window of her door. Inside, Emily rocked their daughter, humming softly, her face turned toward the light. For the first time in years, Daniel understood that love was not always about possession. Sometimes it was about staying close enough to protect, even if you were no longer allowed to hold. He whispered under his breath, "Grace, your name was not chosen by accident." And as he walked away, the faint cry of his newborn daughter followed him down the hall, a sound both fragile and eternal. The day of discharge arrived under a pale sky streaked with soft light. Emily dressed carefully, her movements slow but steady, her body still recovering from labor. Baby Grace was bundled in a small pink blanket, her face calm and perfect as she slept in the carrier that a nurse had helped her adjust. The hospital room, once filled with the sounds of machines and hushed voices, now felt strangely quiet. A knock on the door broke the silence. Daniel stood there, his white coat replaced by a navy sweater and dark jeans. He carried a folder under one arm and a small stuffed rabbit in the other. "I came to make sure everything is set for your discharge," he said, his tone polite but gentle. Emily's expression remained unreadable. "We are ready." He nodded, placing the stuffed rabbit near the carrier. "A little something for her. I remember you used to say every baby should have something soft to hold." Emily hesitated, then brushed her hand over the toy. "Thank you." Daniel looked at the floor, his voice quieter now. "The hospital bill has been taken care of. The nurses said you refused to apply for financial assistance." "Because I do not need charity," she said evenly. "It is not charity," he replied quickly. "I covered it myself. No paperwork, no hospital fund. Just me." She looked up, eyes sharp. "Why? Out of guilt?" Daniel met her gaze steadily. "Out of responsibility, out of care, maybe both." Emily exhaled slowly, exhaustion softening her anger. "Daniel, I do not know what you want from me." He shook his head. "I do not want anything. I just want you to be safe, both of you." The nurse entered with the discharge papers, breaking the tension. "Everything is signed, Miss Carter. You are free to go." Emily thanked her and lifted Grace carefully into her arms. As she turned toward the door, Daniel followed her down the hallway. Outside the hospital entrance, the early afternoon breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Clara's small blue sedan waited at the curb. The woman behind the wheel waved when she saw them. "There is my favorite new mom," Clara called, "and my honorary niece." Emily smiled faintly. "You are a lifesaver, Clara." Clara stepped out, helping her with the bags. Her eyes flicked to Daniel, curiosity sparking. "Dr. Reed, right? I have heard about you." Daniel gave a polite nod. "Thank you for helping her." Clara studied him for a moment. "She deserves all the help in the world. Do not mess that up again." Her words were not cruel, just protective. Daniel accepted them silently. As Emily settled into the passenger seat, Daniel stepped closer, his hands deep in his pockets. "If you need anything, medicine, checkups, help with the baby, I left my direct number in the file. You can call any time." Emily nodded, her voice quiet. "I will manage. Thank you for everything." The car engine started. Grace stirred in her carrier, her small cry cutting through the air. Daniel instinctively leaned forward, but Emily was already soothing her, humming a lullaby he remembered from their first years together. For a moment, the sound transported him back to their old apartment, to late nights filled with laughter and plans for a future that never came. He stepped back, his throat tight. "Goodbye, Emily." She looked at him through the open window. "Goodbye, Daniel." The car pulled away, leaving him standing on the sidewalk as the taillights faded into the distance. He stayed there until the car disappeared completely, the silence around him heavy and final. When he returned to the hospital, Nurse Harper met him near the front desk. "She seems strong," the nurse said softly. Daniel nodded. "Stronger than anyone I know." Harper tilted her head. "You care about her." "I always have," he said, his voice barely audible. That night, as he sat alone in his office, he opened the file on his desk. Inside were Emily's medical forms and the newborn's records. He traced the name written in ink, Grace Reed, and let out a slow breath. He had no idea if Emily would ever forgive him, but he knew one thing for certain: he would never let his pride ruin another chance. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered against the glass, reflections of a world that kept moving forward. For the first time in a long while, Daniel whispered to the quiet room, "Tomorrow, I start becoming the man she needed me to be." 2 weeks had passed since Emily and baby Grace left the hospital, and the world outside seemed quieter than it had before. Clara's apartment sat on the edge of downtown, small but warm, with sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee filling the air each morning. Emily spent her days learning Grace's rhythms, her cries, her soft coos, the way she calmed when Emily hummed. Nights were harder, the exhaustion of motherhood mixed with the quiet ache of memory. Sometimes, in the stillness between feedings, she caught herself wondering what Daniel was doing, if he still thought about them. She always shook the thought away. Across town, Daniel buried himself in work. His schedule overflowed with surgeries, consultations, and meetings. Yet every time he walked into the neonatal wing, his chest tightened. Every newborn he saw reminded him of Grace. He had her photo on his phone, one the nurse had taken after delivery. It was the only image he had, and he looked at it more often than he admitted. One evening, as he reviewed a patient file, his phone buzzed. It was Nurse Harper. "Dr. Reed," she said. "Miss Carter came in today for the baby's checkup." Daniel's heart jumped. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, both are perfectly healthy," Harper replied. "She looks tired but strong. She asked for you, actually. She needed your signature on a form since you handled the surgery." Daniel froze. "She was here. She left about 30 minutes ago." The words lingered long after the call ended. He sat back in his chair, torn between respect for her boundaries and the desperate urge to see them again. That weekend, fate intervened. He had just left the hospital late in the evening when he noticed a familiar figure across the parking lot. Emily was standing beside an old sedan, holding Grace's carrier, her expression tense. The hood of the car was open, and smoke drifted upward. Without thinking, he crossed the lot. "Emily?" She turned, startled. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I work here," he said gently, stopping a few feet away. "What happened?" "The car just died. Clara lent it to me, but I think it overheated. I was about to call for a tow." He glanced at the carrier. Grace stirred inside, letting out a soft whimper. "You cannot wait out here with the baby. It is too cold." Emily hesitated. "I will be fine." "Please," he said, his tone steady but kind. "Let me drive you home. You can come back for the car tomorrow." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. "Fine, but only because of Grace." He opened the passenger door of his black SUV, adjusting the seat so she could fit the baby's carrier securely. The ride was quiet except for Grace's soft breathing and the hum of the engine. Daniel stole glances at them, the glow from the dashboard lighting Emily's tired face. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. Emily looked out the window. "She has her own eyes. She is her own person." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but she looks like you when she sleeps." The silence that followed was not sharp like before. It was softer, full of memories neither dared to touch. When they reached Clara's building, Daniel got out first to help her with the bags. Emily unbuckled Grace's carrier, careful not to wake her. "Thank you for the ride," she said, her voice low. "I would have managed, but thank you." "You do not have to thank me," he said. "You never did." She paused at the doorway, turning to face him. "You keep showing up, Daniel." "Why?" His eyes met hers. "Because I spent 2 years not showing up, and that was the worst mistake of my life." She said nothing, but something flickered behind her eyes, conflict, maybe even forgiveness. He stepped back, giving her space. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Grace." As she closed the door behind her, he stood in the dim hallway, listening to the faint sound of her voice through the wall as she whispered to the baby. The words were too soft to make out, but the tone carried warmth. Daniel walked back to his car under the streetlights, the night air cool against his face. For the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe fate had not finished writing their story. The following morning began with the soft sound of rain tapping against the apartment windows. Emily stood in the small kitchen, gently rocking Grace in her arms while the coffee maker sputtered to life. Clara had already left for work, leaving behind a note on the counter that read, You are doing great. Call me if you need anything." Emily smiled faintly, tracing the ink with her thumb. Grace stirred and let out a tiny sigh, her dark lashes fluttering as she drifted back to sleep. Outside, the city moved quietly beneath the grey sky, but inside the apartment, everything felt still. Emily had learned to savor these quiet moments, the in-between hours when she could breathe, when the world was not demanding anything of her. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from an unknown number. "Good morning, Emily. This is Daniel. I wanted to check if you and Grace got home safely last night." She hesitated, staring at the message for a long moment before typing back, "We did. Thank you for the ride." Almost immediately, a reply appeared. "You are welcome. I did not mean to intrude. I just wanted to make sure you were both all right." Emily sighed. She knew he meant well, but his presence, even through words on a screen, stirred memories she was not ready to face. She put the phone aside and focused on feeding Grace. Later that afternoon, Clara called. "Hey, I need to pick up a few things downtown. Want to come? A little air might help." Emily glanced at the baby, who was now wide awake and babbling softly. "I think Grace would like that," she said. A few hours later, they walked into a small cafe near the hospital, the kind that smelled of fresh pastries and rain-damp wood. Emily ordered tea while Clara handled the stroller. The baby's soft giggles drew smiles from nearby tables. "You know," Clara said, stirring her coffee, "you do not have to keep pretending you are fine. You have been through more than anyone should." Emily smiled weakly. "I am fine, really. I have Grace. That is enough." "Maybe," Clara said gently, "but I saw his face that night. Daniel looked like a man who has been carrying a mountain on his back. You can forgive him without forgetting, you know." Emily looked away, her eyes settling on the window where raindrops slid like silver lines. "Forgiveness does not undo what happened." "No," Clara agreed, "but it might free you from it." Before Emily could respond, the cafe door opened, and a familiar voice greeted the barista. She froze. Daniel stood at the counter, dressed in his grey coat, his hair still damp from the rain. He turned, eyes scanning the room, and stopped when he saw them. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. "Emily," he said softly, approaching their table. "Clara." Clara smiled politely but sensed the weight in the air. "I will give you 2 a minute," she said, rising with her coffee. Emily exhaled, bracing herself. "What are you doing here?" Daniel gestured to the hospital across the street. "A meeting ran late. I did not expect to see you." "We were just leaving," she said quickly, but Grace began to fuss, her small hands reaching out toward him. Daniel hesitated, then crouched beside the stroller. "Hey there, little one." Grace's crying stopped instantly, replaced by a curious coo. Emily's heart tightened. "She remembers you," Daniel said softly. "Babies recognize kindness," Emily replied, her voice quieter now. "That is all," he smiled faintly. "Then I will take that as a start." She watched him, unsure how to respond. There was no arrogance in his tone, no expectation, only quiet sincerity. "I am sorry for showing up like this," he continued, "but I meant what I said before. I will not disappear again." Emily's eyes softened, but her guard remained. "Words are easy, Daniel. Time will tell." "Then let me prove it with time," he said. He stood, placing a small folded card on the table. "This is my personal contact. Not for emergencies, just if you ever need someone." As he left, Emily picked up the card. It was simple, his name written in neat letters. No titles, no positions, just Daniel Reed. Grace let out a soft yawn, her tiny hand gripping the edge of the card. Emily smiled faintly and whispered, "Maybe people really can change." Outside, Daniel paused under the awning, the rain falling steady around him. For the first time, he did not feel like a man haunted by mistakes. He felt like a man waiting patiently, hopefully for the chance to make things right. Over the next few weeks, Emily's days began to settle into a rhythm of soft mornings and sleepless nights. Grace grew stronger, her small laughter filling the apartment like sunlight. Emily often found herself watching her daughter's face and wondering which parts of her came from Daniel. The curve of her lips, the quiet strength in her eyes, it was impossible to ignore. Every few days, a message appeared on her phone from Daniel. Sometimes it was just a question about how Grace was doing. Sometimes it was a simple good morning or good night. He never asked to visit, never crossed a line, and somehow that restraint made it harder for Emily to keep her walls up. One Friday evening, Clara walked in holding takeout boxes. "You need a break," she said, setting them on the table. "And before you argue, I already found a sitter for Grace. My cousin will watch her for 2 hours." Emily blinked. "A sitter? I cannot." "Yes, you can," Clara insisted with a grin. "There is a charity dinner tonight at the hospital. You will eat, listen to music, and breathe. I know some of the board members, they will be there too." Emily hesitated but finally agreed. A few hours later, she stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the wrinkles from a simple navy dress Clara had loaned her. When she arrived at the hospital's banquet hall, she felt a wave of unease. The chandeliers glowed softly, the tables gleamed with silver and glass, and voices murmured in polite conversation. She found a quiet spot near the back, hoping to remain invisible. Then she heard a familiar voice over the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us to support the Children's Health Fund." It was Daniel. He stood at the podium, calm and composed, his expression thoughtful. "Tonight is not about medicine or profit," he said. "It is about remembering that compassion saves lives as much as science does." Applause filled the room. Emily watched him from a distance, noticing how his words carried a quiet sincerity she had never seen before. After the speech, as people mingled, Daniel moved through the crowd, shaking hands and offering polite smiles. When his eyes met hers across the room, he stopped. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he excused himself from the conversation and walked toward her. "You came," he said softly, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Clara invited me," she replied. "It was a nice speech." "Thank you," he said. "I meant every word." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, surrounded by the hum of music and laughter. "Would you like to step outside?" he asked. "It is quieter on the terrace." Emily hesitated but followed him. The cool night air was a relief after the warmth of the ballroom. City lights stretched across the skyline, shimmering against the glass windows. "You have changed," she said quietly. "You never used to talk about compassion." Daniel smiled faintly. "Losing you taught me what it costs to forget it." She looked away, her fingers brushing the railing. "I never wanted to be part of that world again. The boardrooms, the cameras, the gossip. I just wanted peace." "You deserve that," he said. "Both of you do." The sincerity in his tone softened something inside her. For the first time, she did not feel anger when she looked at him. She just felt tired. "Grace is all I care about now," she said. "I know," Daniel replied, "and that is why I am trying to be someone she would be proud to meet someday." Emily studied him, unsure whether to believe the man standing before her or the memory of the one who had once walked away. "Words are easy," she said again. "Actions are harder." Daniel nodded. "Then I will keep showing up until my actions speak for themselves." The music drifted through the open doors behind them, soft and distant. For a moment, they stood together in silence, watching the city below. Emily finally said, "It is late. I should get back to Grace." "Can I drive you?" he asked. "No," she said gently, "but thank you." As she turned to leave, he said her name. She paused. "For what it is worth," Daniel said quietly, "you make that dress look like home." She blinked, surprised by the simplicity of the compliment, and then walked away, her heart unexpectedly unsteady. Daniel watched her go, the echo of her presence lingering long after the crowd had faded. For the first time, he felt that redemption might not come through grand gestures, but through patience, humility, and the courage to wait. The days after the charity event passed quietly, yet something unspoken had shifted between them. Emily tried to focus on her new routine, caring for Grace and searching for part-time work she could manage from home. Clara often teased her, saying that her life was starting to look like a sunrise after a long storm. Still, at night, when the world went still, Emily found herself thinking about the way Daniel had looked at her on that terrace, the way his words had sounded honest, not rehearsed. One afternoon, as she returned from the grocery store, she noticed an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Emily, the hospital is opening a new community outreach clinic next month. It will provide free prenatal care for low-income mothers. I would like to dedicate it in your name, not for publicity, but because your strength inspired it. I hope you will come to the opening. Daniel." She stared at the letter for a long moment, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Clara found her sitting at the kitchen table later that evening, the note folded neatly in her hand. "You are going, right?" Clara asked. "I do not know," Emily said softly. "It feels strange. I did not do anything." "You survived," Clara replied simply. "That is not nothing." A week later, Emily found herself standing outside the new clinic, a modest building painted in soft white and pale blue. Volunteers bustled about, arranging flowers and chairs. She had promised herself she would only stay long enough to show support. Grace slept peacefully in her stroller, wrapped in a yellow blanket. When Daniel saw her arrive, his eyes widened slightly, but he did not approach right away. Instead, he continued greeting the staff, giving her space. When the speeches began, he stepped to the microphone. "This clinic exists because of compassion," he said, his voice clear and steady. "It exists because sometimes the people who have the least to give end up giving the most hope, courage, kindness. There is someone here today who taught me that." His eyes found Emily in the crowd, but he did not call her by name. "This is for every mother who kept going when the world gave her every reason to stop." The audience applauded. Emily felt her chest tighten, emotion she could not name rising like a tide. After the ceremony, Daniel walked over slowly. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I did not expect you to." "I almost did not," she admitted. "But Grace deserved to see this, even if she will not remember it yet." He smiled. "One day she will, and she will know her mother inspired it." Emily looked around at the building, the staff, the mothers with children in their arms. "You really built this because of me, because of what you represent," he said. "Strength that is not loud but steady, the kind that heals." She studied him, searching for the man she once loved. "You are different now." "I am trying to be," he said, "every day." Before she could reply, Grace began to fuss. Daniel instinctively bent down, his hands steady as he helped adjust the blanket. The baby calmed almost instantly. "She trusts you," Emily said softly. "Babies recognize hearts before they recognize faces." He looked up, his gaze meeting hers. "Then I hope she sees mine for what it is now." The words lingered between them like a fragile truth. A staff member called Daniel over to take photos with the donors, and Emily nodded for him to go. As he walked away, she glanced down at Grace, who had fallen back asleep. The clinic's sign shimmered in the afternoon sun, the letters reading, "The Grace Carter Center." Emily's breath caught as she read it again. Her daughter's name. She looked across the courtyard and met Daniel's eyes once more. He gave a small, humble nod. For the first time in years, Emily felt something she had not let herself feel: peace. She whispered to her daughter, "Maybe some stories do not end. They just find their way home." 2 months after the opening of the Grace Carter Center, life had begun to take on a gentler rhythm. The clinic thrived, serving mothers who once had nowhere to turn. Each time Daniel passed through its halls, he was reminded of the night that had changed everything, the night he brought Emily and Grace safely into the world. Word of the clinic's work spread through the city, drawing praise from the medical community. But Daniel avoided interviews. He preferred quiet progress over public recognition. His focus remained on the work and, in quiet moments, on the woman who had unknowingly rekindled his sense of purpose. One crisp morning, Emily visited the clinic for a follow-up appointment with Grace. The staff greeted her warmly, treating her not as a patient, but as part of the clinic's story. As she walked through the hallway, she paused by a framed photograph hanging near the entrance. It showed Daniel surrounded by the clinic staff, his expression calm, his eyes softer than she remembered. She found herself smiling before she realized it. "Emily," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to see Daniel standing a few feet away, holding a stack of patient charts. "You look well," he said. "So does Grace." "She is growing fast," Emily replied. "She keeps me busy." Daniel smiled. "That is a good sign." For a moment, the air between them was quiet but comfortable. Emily adjusted Grace's blanket. "I saw the sign again on my way in. You really named it after her." "It felt right," Daniel said. "She represents hope, and you represent strength. The two belong together." Emily looked down, her voice soft. "I never thanked you properly for that." "You do not have to," he replied. "You already did by showing up." They walked outside to the courtyard, where the winter sunlight filtered through bare trees. Grace reached out from her stroller, laughing as the wind brushed her cheeks. Daniel bent down, holding her small hand gently. "She is beautiful," he said, his voice filled with quiet awe. "She has your courage. She has your determination," Emily countered, smiling faintly. "A dangerous combination." He laughed softly, the sound warm against the chill air. Maybe it is what she needs to survive this world. Emily studied him, noticing the faint lines near his eyes, the way time had softened him. There was humility now where pride used to live. "You are different," she said. "I hardly recognize you." "I hope that is a good thing," he said. "It is," she admitted. "You seem lighter." "That is because I stopped trying to fix the past," Daniel said quietly. "Now I am just trying to honor it." His words lingered, settling into the space between them like truth that needed no reply. A nurse called Daniel from across the courtyard, holding a clipboard. He gave a small nod but stayed where he was for another moment. "Emily," he said, "I know you do not need my help, but I want you to know you always have it, in any way you choose." Emily met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there, the kind that could not be faked. "I believe you," she said softly. It was the first time she had said those words in years. For Daniel, it felt like the closing of an old wound. As she turned the stroller toward the exit, Grace looked back, giggling. Daniel waved, his heart full in a way he could not explain. When they disappeared around the corner, he stood for a long while beneath the grey sky, feeling both the ache of what had been lost and the quiet joy of what had been found. Later that evening, as Emily rocked Grace to sleep, she thought about Daniel's words. Maybe people did not change overnight, but little by little, they could learn to be better. She kissed Grace's forehead and whispered, "Your father is trying." The baby sighed in her sleep, and outside, the city lights blinked softly, as if the world itself was finally beginning to forgive. Winter slowly turned into spring, and with it came quiet change. The days grew longer, and the first blooms appeared outside the Grace Carter Center. Inside the clinic, Daniel worked tirelessly, often late into the evening, yet there was a new calm about him. He smiled more easily, listened more deeply, and treated every patient with a gentleness that came from a place far beyond duty. Emily noticed these changes each time she visited for Grace's checkups. What had once been awkward exchanges now became simple conversations about the baby's milestones or the clinic's progress. Their words no longer carried sharp edges. One afternoon, Daniel found her sitting under the tree in the courtyard, watching Grace toddle across the grass, her tiny legs unsteady but determined. The sight made him stop in his tracks. "She is walking already," he said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. Emily looked up, smiling. "Barely, but she insists on doing it herself." He chuckled. "She gets that from you." "I think she gets her stubbornness from both of us," she replied, her tone soft but teasing. They watched Grace wobble, fall, then push herself back up with a tiny grunt of effort. Daniel bent down, ready to help, but Emily shook her head gently. "Let her try," she said. "She needs to fall sometimes." He nodded, understanding more than she knew. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of children playing nearby filling the air. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Emily, there is something I need to tell you." She turned toward him, her expression cautious but calm. "2 years ago, when I believed the rumors about you, it was because someone close to me planted them. My business partner, Michael, forged the financial records and made it look like you took money from my company. I found proof of it last month." Emily's breath caught. "You mean all of that, the accusations, the divorce it was, all because of him?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly, "and I let my pride do the rest. I wanted to believe I had been betrayed, so I did not ask for the truth. I am sorry, Emily. I do not expect forgiveness, but you deserve to know the truth." Emily looked away, her eyes glistening. The wind rustled through the leaves above them, carrying the faint scent of flowers. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because I finally understand that honesty is the only way forward," he said. "I cannot undo what I did, but I can stop hiding from it." For a long moment, she said nothing. Grace crawled back toward them, reaching for her mother's hand. Emily lifted her onto her lap, her gaze distant. "You broke something in me, Daniel, something I thought could never be fixed. But watching you with her, seeing what you have built, I see a man I do not recognize. Maybe that is a good thing." "It is," he said softly, "because the man I was before did not deserve you." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw no arrogance, no pretense, just remorse and quiet hope. "I cannot promise things will go back to how they were," she said. "I do not want them to," Daniel replied. "I just want to move forward from here, however you will let me." Grace clapped her hands, breaking the tension, her laughter bright and pure. Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Maybe we start small," she said. "Friends, for her sake." Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "Friends," he agreed, yet deep down, he knew it meant something far greater. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the courtyard, Emily stood to leave. Daniel watched her walk away, Grace resting against her shoulder, and for the first time, he felt peace not because she had forgiven him, but because she finally knew the truth. Sometimes redemption did not come through grand gestures. Sometimes it came through the quiet courage of honesty and the hope that forgiveness might one day follow. Spring faded into summer, and life began to weave itself into something quieter, steadier, and whole. The Grace Carter Center had become a haven for mothers who once thought they had no voice, and Daniel made sure each new face that came through the doors was treated with dignity and care. He often saw Emily there, volunteering in small ways, reading to children in the waiting area, helping young mothers fill out forms, or simply bringing laughter to the tired halls. Their friendship grew like the slow bloom of a flower, fragile at first, then rooted in something real. Grace, now toddling with confidence, had become the heart of their small world. She called Daniel Dr. Dan, her bright voice echoing down the clinic halls, and every time she did, Emily's eyes softened just a little more. One evening, as the sun painted the courtyard in gold, Daniel found Emily sitting on a bench, watching Grace chase bubbles that drifted in the air. "She is fearless," he said, sitting beside her. "She gets that from you." Emily smiled faintly. "Or maybe she gets it from us both. Fear does not seem to last long around her." They watched the child run, her laughter filling the space between them. "You know," Daniel began quietly, "I used to think success was measured by what I owned, by the numbers in my account, by how many people respected my name. But standing here, seeing this place, seeing her, I realize success is simpler. It is being needed by the right people. It is being forgiven." Emily turned to him. "Forgiveness is not a gift, Daniel. It is a process. It takes time." "Then I will keep waiting," he said, his tone gentle. "I am not going anywhere." A breeze carried the scent of lilac through the air. Grace ran toward them, tripping over her tiny shoes before Daniel caught her just in time. Emily laughed softly as he lifted the little girl into his arms. Grace wrapped her arms around his neck, her small head resting on his shoulder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was the kind of silence that said everything words could not. As the light began to fade, Emily stood and adjusted Grace's sun hat. "She should get some rest," she said. Daniel nodded, walking with them toward the clinic entrance. At the door, he paused. "Emily, thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. You did not have to." She looked up at him, her eyes calm and clear. "I did not do it for you. I did it for her. But somewhere along the way, I realized I needed peace too." He smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. "Then maybe we both found what we were looking for." Emily nodded, shifting Grace in her arms. "Maybe we did." They said goodnight, and Daniel watched her walk away, the setting sun outlining her silhouette like a memory turned into light. Months later, on Grace's first birthday, the three of them stood together at the clinic garden surrounded by flowers and laughter. Volunteers, mothers and children sang softly while Grace clapped her hands, her face full of wonder. Daniel handed her a single candle to blow out, helping her guide her breath. Emily watched, her heart full, realizing how far they had all come from pain to healing, from misunderstanding to trust. When the crowd cheered, Daniel turned to her and said quietly, "You know, I never thought I would deserve this kind of happiness." Emily smiled. "You did not have to deserve it. You just had to choose it." The words lingered like sunlight after rain. As the day ended, Grace fell asleep in her mother's arms, her tiny hand clutching Daniel's finger. The three of them stood there beneath the fading light, surrounded by the hum of life and laughter. And in that moment, everything that had once been broken felt whole again. Because love, Emily thought, was never about perfection. It was about grace, the kind that saves, the kind that forgives, and the kind that stays even after the storm. In this emotional and cinematic journey of love, redemption, and second chances, a single mother and her former husband, a doctor once blinded by pride, find their way back to forgiveness through the miracle of their child. This story captures the essence of humanity, compassion, and resilience that defines true millionaire stories. It follows two hearts torn apart by misunderstanding who slowly rebuild trust in a world where power meets kindness and love becomes the ultimate healer. Perfect for fans of touching drama and modern fairy tales, this narrative embodies the emotional depth and cinematic beauty that make millionaire stories unforgettable. Through hope, humility, and redemption, the tale reminds us that real wealth is not counted in money but in the courage to forgive and love again, making it one of the most heartfelt millionaire stories ever told. Whether you seek inspiration or healing, this moving journey will stay with you long after it ends, proving that the greatest millionaire stories are those written by the heart itself.